Good day, everyone. Today, we are going to tackle the literary piece written by Rolando Santos Tino entitled Valediction of Hillcrest. But before that, let us first have a brief description or background of the author. Rolando Santos Tino was born in Gagalangin, Tondo, Manila on March 5, 1937. He was a Filipino poet, dramatist, director, actor, critic, essayist, and educator. Rolando Tino is a Philippine national artist for theater and literature. As a child, Tino was fond of organizing and directing his playmates for costume celebrations. He was an active participant in the Filipino movie industry and enjoyed working with Philippine celebrities who himself had admired in his childhood. Tino himself became a film actor and script writer. In the mid-1960s, Tino decided to try writing in Tagalog, and the product of this trial was the collection of poems now called Bagay. Rolando Tino was the sole inventor of Taglish, or Tagalog and English in Philippine poetry. Through this, he gave an authentic tone to the poetry of the native middle-class Filipino. As I have mentioned earlier, Valediction sa Hillcrest is a poem written by Rolando Tino. When we say valediction, it is an act of bidding goodbye. So, this poem is about a person leaving from New York and going back to the Philippines. The person is having a dilemma to decide between two places, which is Tondo and New York, and how it affects his whole being. The author writes his thoughts and experiences in a very descriptive and creative way. Other than that, the poem also uses two different languages, which is English and Tagalog. The reason why these two languages were used is because of the two nations or countries he is going back to and leaving. The poem is rather complex because it uses two languages. Thus, this creates a unique form of writing in which, as we further discuss this poem, we'll learn how he utilizes these languages in relation to the personal situation in life.
Since this poem is very much tricky to read, it's hard to combine English and Tagalog words in a poem. So I'm just gonna read it to you in order for me to deliver it properly with a proper pronunciation. This poem is entitled Valediction sa Hillcrest by Rolando Tino. Pag-collect ng Railway Express sa aking face, diretso na iyon sa barko while I take the plane. Inakyat kong muli ang N311 at dahil dead of winter, naka-top coat at galoshes akong nag-right turn sa N-wing ng mahabang dilim. Tunnel yata nga abot sa Tondo. Kinapa ko ang switch sa hall. Sa isang pitik, nag-shrink ang imaginary tunnel. Nagparang ataol or kinikong. Strangely absolute ang impression ng hilera ng mga pintong nagprosisyon. Individual identification, parang mummy causes. Di nameplate, di numero, di hometown address. Antiseptic ang atmosphere. Streamlined yet e-filing cabinet. Filing, hindi naman deaths ah. Remembrances, oo, yung medyo malapot dahil alam mo na, I'm quitting the place after 2.5 years. After 2.5 years, di man nagkatsampong mag-ugat, ika nga, syempre naging attached. Parang morning glorying mahirap mapaknit sa alambreng trellis. At pagkabukas ko ng kwarto, hubot-hubad na ang mattresses. Wala ng kutsyon ang easy chair. Mga drawer ng bureau'y nakanganga. Sabay-sabay na nag-o-oration, nagkahiyaan, nabara. Of course, tuloy ang radiator sa pag-aralgat. Nasa New York na si Bob and the two Allens. Yung mga quarterbacks across the hall, pihadong panay sa Desmoines. Don and Constance aren't coming back at all. Gusto ko mang magpaalam, but to whom? The drapes? The wash bowls? Sa double-decker na pinaikot-ikot namin ni Candace Wami? To create space. Hopeless. Talagang impossible. Of course, tuloy ang radiator sa paglagutok. And the above silence, nakakaiyak kung sumagot. Bueno, let's get it over with. It's a long walk to the depot. Tama na ang sophistication. Sa steep incline pababa sa highway, where all things level, sabi nga, there is a flurry and gentle. Pag whoosh-whoosh ng paa ko, the snow melts right under. Nagtutubig parang asukat. Humuhulas, nagsisentimento.
Valediction sa Hillcrest is a poem written by Rolando Tinio, which is about Rolando Tinio living from the US of A and going back to the Philippines. He writes his thoughts and experiences in a very descriptive and creative way. The poem also uses two different languages, which are English and Tagalog, and the reason why these two languages were used is because of the confliction between the two nations or countries he is going back to and living. So in the poem, you can see that there are a lot of different metaphors used in the poem. The metaphors are used in a very creative and somehow deep way. The metaphors have a lot of possible meanings if misunderstood. So you can easily make your own meaning of the different lines and stanzas, which may mislead you to a different meaning of the poem. The poem is basically about how Rolando Tinio was conflicted about leaving the US of A and going back to the Philippines. He thinks about how he grew to have sentimental value to the place he had stayed in, and also for the things that also has been there for a long time or with personal value. He also thinks about how long he hasn't been to the Philippines and being trapped in choosing between the two. So the character in this poem was describing what he was witnessing right now as he walked by his former room. He's linking his experiences with his memories, since memories are usually projected in our minds as a pleasant experience, and when we miss something, remembering and reminiscing about it would make us happy because the joyful time we had in the past. He also used a file cabinet or drawer to show us that he is comparing his experiences to memories, since a file cabinet can constantly be filled with new items, much like memories can always recall new things that happen to us, and we can retrieve any file from it whenever we choose. After this section, the next stanza focuses on the person's personal room, which he regards as a sacred or holy space, despite the fact that it does not appear to be his original room and in his belongings have been removed. It is still his significant space where he has experienced both happy and sad events. When he noticed that the radiator was making noise and disturbing the room's sacredness, he began to recall his friends and acquaintances, as well as everything that had happened in the past in that hall, and when he wanted to say goodbye, he asked himself to whom he should say goodbye because there was no one else in the room. After all of this deliberation, he made up his decision and said, "Bueno, let's get this over with. It's a long walk to the depot," implying that he will immediately take a cab to the airport. And when he stepped out of the building and onto the highway, he became unsure of whether he will stay or return to the Philippines, indicating that he is unsure of his own identity, which connects to what I said earlier about his use of two languages, indicating that even though he has only been abroad for 2.5 years, he already considers it to be his home, along with his original hometown of Tondo. So in conclusion, the persona believed that staying or returning home would not help him solve his identity problem, so he simply went to another location to search for his identity, because the place where you stay does not make you who you are, but rather the experience you have in that particular location.